We are entering into the final phase of marketing and updates around Cyberpunk 2077, or at least the final phase before we can actually get our hands on it. And as such, over the past couple of weeks, and in particular, over the past 7 days, we've gotten some pretty major updates around this game, including several from CD Projekt themselves around development, monetization, and even the marketing of this game. We know that Night City Wire is coming later this week on Friday, so I wanted to upload this video today to serve almost as a bit of a recap to get you up to speed on everything that's been recently going on with Cyberpunk 2077, but even further, just share with you a lot of details that may have been hard to follow. There's been a lot of headlines over the past couple of weeks, many things shared that you may have just missed, and hopefully this video will serve to give you a good summation of all of it before we get the big new info dump later this week. If you guys enjoy the content, you can get subscribed. Starting today, I'm pretty much going to go hard on covering Cyberpunk 2077, and of course after release on the game, but if you do want to support the channel now, leaving a like does really help with this video and the YouTube algorithm. So first and foremost, let's talk about Night City Wire 3. This is coming this Friday if you're watching this video as it goes live, or more specifically September 18th at 6 p.m. CEST. To convert that to Eastern time, it'll be noon Eastern time on Friday. As you can see with this tweet, CD Projekt describes how it's going to focus on the gangs in Night City as well as Cyberpunk 2077's original score. In a little teaser tweet, you could actually see images and a video showing off each game. There's a nice Reddit post compiling all of these images so you could see it holistically, each of the 9 gangs of Night City represented. And this is actually getting me pretty excited. I think this image does a great job at showing you the distinct style and culture that each of these gangs have. We've seen several gangs like the Maelstrom and even the Voodoo Boys via some past gameplay videos, and it really represented how different and distinctive they can be, whether that be from their actual culture and lore, but also in gameplay. So I imagine we'll see a lot more of that in this one, especially for some of the gangs we haven't seen much of in Cyberpunk 2077 thus far. Outside of that, when it comes to the original soundtrack, they just recently released a song on their YouTube channel earlier this week, but also there was just a new Cyber magazine that did have a cover art with Lizzie Wizzy. So perhaps we'll get some more insight into the individual artists and how they're playing a role, as many of the artists in Cyberpunk do have real songs that you can listen to right now, or even are acted and portrayed by real people. So I wouldn't be shocked if we get some background around that, and perhaps even more Johnny Silverhand, because I feel like if they're talking about the soundtrack, they're going to have to at least mention him. It actually almost looks like we got a teaser image of some of what we may be seeing or the filming of this third Night City Wire a little while ago. This is going to be the 3rd episode of Night City Wire, and I know for many, people are suspecting this was the final one. It seems like this theory or rumor really got started by the listing on CD Projekt's own website. After Night City Wire 1 came out, there was entries for 2 more, but in reality, this will not mark the final Night City Wire, and more are on the horizon. From the recent investor call, which I will be talking more about later in this video, they did mention how a few more Night City Wires are to come over the next 2.5 months. So it doesn't even sound like there's one more, but actually several more at the very least. Tokyo Game Show is taking place shortly after this Night City Wire goes live, and although many were speculating perhaps we're really going to get back-to-back Night City Wire episodes, one on Friday and one just a few days later for TGS. But in reality, what that is more likely to be is actually a Japanese translation. Many of the Night City Wire episodes have actually had re-releases in different languages, including different people. It's not like it's just subtitled in a different language. So I'd expect we'll have the premiere of Night City Wire 3 in Japanese during Tokyo Game Show. And as far as other information we may hear about during Night City Wire, or perhaps in some of the interviews that are likely to follow, because with the past 2 Night City Wires, we've seen not only the video segment and the information dump from CD Projekt themselves, but also interviews or even media hands-on after the first one. We just recently heard how this game will, 1, be under 200 gigabytes, because there were some rumors about that, but also how the system requirements for it may be coming soon. So that's some of the upcoming information that you can look forward to. But even separate from that, we recently got the financial report from CD Projekt Red, which contained a ton of new information and even some images of Cyberpunk 2077. And of course, some controversy followed. But just first and foremost, an easy thing to get out of the way, if you are still one of those people concerned about Cyberpunk 2077 coming out this year, it was described how the game entered into the final stage of development and it's being close to sent for certification, and overall it's described how everything is on track and they began the final preparations with the game. So overall, even more so than in the past, it seems very, very unlikely that this game will get delayed again. In the wake of several other publishers raising prices of their games for next gen to $70, we got a restatement by CD Projekt that the price is staying starting at $60, and you will get a free next-gen upgrade. The way it's going to work with Cyberpunk 2077 is the game will be available on current gen and next gen. You get that free upgrade if you want it, and it will look at least slightly better on next gen systems, but at some point in 2021, the game will receive a free update for next gen systems that makes it look even better. So almost think of it as on release, you're getting the light next gen version, but then down the road, we're getting a more full and proper next gen version. But again, both are free. If you own Cyberpunk 2077 on a console, you'll get that upgrade. Something else they talked a bit about here was marketing going forward, and described how the vast majority of the marketing is still ahead for this game. They had some graphs representing this. You could see how the lines get thicker as they approach the release date. And although they talk about marketing broadly here, it seems like it's mostly in terms of expenditure, how much they're spending on marketing. They describe the biggest ever marketing budget in CD Projekt history, and there'll be more Night City wires, as I mentioned earlier, but even some other activities. They didn't expand on this too much, so I don't know exactly what we're going to be seeing or hearing, but probably some other trailers or something to fill out those ad spots. So at the very least, you'll probably be seeing a lot more Cyberpunk 2077, whether it be out in the wild or even just ads on videos. But something else we know we're hearing more about in the future is the DLC for this game, as they've reiterated here that everything as far as DLC for Cyberpunk 2077 will be shared prior to release. What we know right now is that it's going to be following a similar path to The Witcher 3, so there'll be free smaller scale DLCs. You can see many of the Witcher 3 free DLCs that aren't huge, they're not a ton of new content for the game, but they are free, so it's kind of hard to complain. And Cyberpunk will have several of those, but also larger scale expansions, which will be paid. So again, over the next 2 months prior to release, we will be getting new details about all of that. It's not clear how in depth they will go, but we'll probably at least have a surface level view of what exactly the free DLCs will be and what exactly the expansions will be. And it is important to separate those. There's definitely been posts around how all Cyberpunk DLC will be free, but they are separating DLC and expansions. The larger scale expansions will cost money for this game. It's not that everything is going to be free as far as post-launch content. But then speaking of post-launch content, or really not post-launch content, let's talk about Cyberpunk multiplayer, as this caused quite a bit of controversy and concern/confusion among the community, with really all of it stemming from this earnings call. But I think the confusion goes back quite a bit further than that. So during this earnings call, there's some questions about Cyberpunk multiplayer and monetization. They didn't really get into it, but they did say, of course, you'll be able to expect microtransactions in Cyberpunk multiplayer, which spanned many angry Reddit posts, many articles on this, and I'm going to try and explain what exactly is going on here, because although many people may disagree, I do find the Cyberpunk multiplayer situation to be somewhat confusing. So back in summer of 2019, we saw this article from a Polish website. It was quoting the CEO of CD Projekt as saying, "We are working on 3 Cyberpunk things, the main game and 2 more. There are 3 teams." And then later expanding as to how there's 40 people on this new game, and the studio is focused on the Cyberpunk 2077 multiplayer mode. Due to the terminology here, many other articles were published talking about how a new Cyberpunk multiplayer game was coming out, or there was somehow going to be several Cyberpunk related games. But of course, this was via Google Translate because the original article was in Polish. So we saw correction articles saying how there actually isn't multiple Cyberpunk related games in development, and CD Projekt themselves said, "We currently have a total of 5 teams working on a number of projects, with 3 focusing on the development of Cyberpunk 2077, and then with a separate studio where around 40 industry specialists are engaged in technology R&D. And then shortly thereafter, we saw more official confirmation on Twitter that Cyberpunk 2077 was getting multiplayer, described how, until now, the only thing we said about multi was that it was an R&D. As we're getting closer to launching single-player Cyberpunk 2077, we'd like to confirm that multiplayer is in the works if you feel like lending your skills apply. The plan now is to deliver Cyberpunk 2077 in April, then follow it with DLCs free and single-player content, and once we're done, invite you for some multiplayer action." And I think it's really as a result of all of that the confusion started around what this multiplayer mode or game was or isn't, because in reality, it's not a multiplayer mode for Cyberpunk 2077. I think a lot of people liken it to something like GTA Online, where you buy Grand Theft Auto 5 and get GTA Online. Instead, Cyberpunk 2077's multiplayer is a totally separate game. So when they said, of course, there will be microtransactions for multiplayer, they weren't referring to Cyberpunk 2077, which they have previously and continue to restate won't have microtransactions, but the other multiplayer game. I just think due to the way this was revealed and due to some of the discussion on it, this back and forth, it has definitely made it more confusing. Is this a mode mode, or is this a game? Because based off this first article, it seemed like a game, then it seemed like a mode, and then it was reclarified to actually be a game later on. And in reality, we've known since earlier this year that it was a separate AAA game. So a lot of these most recent articles are more so than anything else a result of lazy journalism. But for the average consumer, you could definitely see how this is pretty confusing. And just to finalize this, Cyberpunk 2077's official Twitter account just recently tweeted, "Nothing changed. Cyberpunk 2077 is a single-player game with 0 microtransactions, 1 single purchase. No tricks, don't believe the clickbait. Cyberpunk Multiplayer/Online, which is a separate project, will have some microtransactions, but we said that a year ago already. Like always, expect us treating your money with respect." So hopefully that clears up some of the confusion and really how the confusion started. As far as what we know about Cyberpunk Multiplayer, we don't know much. We know the studio it's being developed by, that reportedly 40 or so people are on it. That's going to be coming out apparently around 2022 after all of the regular Cyberpunk 2077 expansions. And even during the earnings call, although they mentioned monetization of this and how microtransactions will be included, they're very reluctant to even describe monetization too explicitly, just saying that they always want to make people happy to spend money. And expanding on that with, they want you to feel like you have value with what you purchase via a microtransaction in Cyberpunk Multiplayer, that you're happy you spent money on the product, and there's not going to be anything like paywalls or milking gamers. So it's still literally years away at this point, and I wouldn't be shocked if over the next year and a half, we will hear quite a bit more about it after the release of Cyberpunk 2077, but for now, it seems like it's probably still in its earlier stages, so we don't know a ton. But transitioning a bit away from the more controversial aspects of the recent financial report, we also got a glimpse at the character creator. It's not much, it's very small, very blurry. It definitely looks like there'll be more beard options at least compared to what we had in the past. Although one outlet that got a hands-on demo with Cyberpunk 2077 actually did a really good job at documenting every customization option they found during the hands-on demo, so that there's no images or videos to accompany that. If you want details on the character creator, I'll have a link to that full article down below where they go a bit more in depth on their impressions of it. We also just recently got a new RTX trailer, as well as some images which are actually just stills from the RTX trailer. And overall, though there's a few things you could extract from this trailer, some of the stills that you can look at, I think it more so is a showcases just how high fidelity and high quality this game is going to be from a graphic standpoint. I can already tell how hot my room is going to be while playing this. I definitely will not turn the heat on this winter. An important disclaimer, it does look like these are actually stills from the trailer, so not necessarily proper screenshots taken in game, but images taken from the video, or at least that's the community speculation. We also separately did get a variety of other images from CD Projekt themselves, many aspects of the game, and really just the game world, which does look beautiful. And finally, a closer look at some of the in-game vehicles, which I think actually look really cool. Outside of official screenshots and in-game video, we also got a few more concept or artwork-based images, one for actually celebrating the Twitter hitting 1 million followers, another one from the official PlayStation Magazine. And from PlayStation Magazine, we got a few images of some actual in-game content, some of the weapons looking very cool, and some minor details on them. In particular, reportedly there's actually disposable weapons in this world, and gun culture is described as what you could find in America turned up to 11. It's just very casual and common to own weapons in Night City. Some other minor details, we saw that one of the playtesters did actually complete this and platinum it on PlayStation, giving us a look at some of the trophies you can win with Cyberpunk, although of course with a pre-release build it is subject to change. Reportedly we will be able to adjust subtitle size and color. A common complaint from some of the trailers or gameplay was that it was actually hard to read or see the subtitles, especially when stuff was going on, but this fortunately will be a very customizable feature. And then finally, how the Chinese voice work being done for Cyberpunk 2077 is 15 to 20% larger than that of The Witcher 3 plus DLC. So the voice acting for this game is more so than that of all of The Witcher plus its DLC content, which is kind of insane. And of course, that's a very specific statistic. It could just mean there's a ton of talking in this game and not necessarily a ton of story content, but it's certainly looking like Cyberpunk 2077 is going to be a massive world to jump into. And I know I am very excited for it. That was most of what I wanted to share with you today. Hopefully we'll find out more later this week, and hopefully this video just served as being helpful or informative, a good roundup of some of the recent news and info, hopefully some clarification also. As always, again, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.